Good morning. Welcome back to the Red Mic. Thanks for being here and happy Thursday. These Red Mic messages are leadership and life lessons I've picked up from 25 years as a public servant, 16 years as a youth football coach and scouting volunteer, and 10 years as a mediocre athlete with far more heart than actual physical ability. Today's Red Mic message is going to be a departure of sorts. I'm not going to talk about, any real life lessons at all, other than a few that I picked up here and there while working for her. But today's going to be a tribute of sorts to Carol Keaton Rylander. Well, that's what I knew her as. I believe she was still Carol Keaton Strayhorn at the end of her life. Although I will note that in her obituary that her family listed her as Carol Keaton. So um, she passed away yesterday. The timing is interesting because just Monday I mentioned, you know, some speeches that I wrote for her and that I needed to touch base back with y'all about some of my experiences. And like a lot of experiences in life, a lot of relationships in life, my relationship with Carol was complicated. It was good and it was bad. Towards the end of my active relationship with her, frankly, it was mostly bad, and that's why I left. Started working for Carol in November of 2001. It was my it was my first job here in Austin. Before that, I'd been working for my state senator, Tom Haywood, up in Wichita Falls. Well, he had passed away, and there was no guarantee the new guy was going to hire any of us. And frankly, I wouldn't have wanted to work for that senator anyway. So I'd applied for a few jobs down here. Now, I'd covered Carol in '94 when she ran for Railroad Commission. And we hit it off. Uh, she, in fact, reached out to me a couple of times uh, after articles I wrote had been published and thanking me for them. And, I wrote what she said and wrote what her critics said. And my whole idea as a reporter was you don't put your own in it. You talk to other people and say, okay, well, what about this? What about that? And you put their stuff into it. And she appreciated that. And, filed it away. And yeah, I covered her a few times throughout the years, but, you know, we weren't friends and it was a professional relationship. But when Tom Haywood died, um, I knew that we were going to have to leave Wichita Falls. My only options at that point were to go back into media sales or go back to the newspaper, and both of those were non-starters. I didn't want to do either one of those again. So I I would have preferred that we stay in North Texas somewhere. It's where our family was, etc. Ended up getting a job working for Carol. It was one of two job offers I got, and hers was the better offer, so that's the one I took. And taught me a lot about setting goals, and not just for yourself, but for your organization, for uh, frankly your state. Um, like I said, we had a complicated relationship, but she was fun to write for. Um, Probably the speech that I wrote for her that got the most traction was, um, if you don't know how state government in Texas works, Texas has a balanced budget requirement. So that means the state cannot spend more than they have. And she used to refer to that as, we've got to make sure we've got a good estimate so the lawmakers don't overshoot the runway. Um, well, there was a particular after 9/11, as you may recall, the bottom dropped out of a lot of budgets, and there ended up being what's referred to as a shortfall, meaning the projection for the next budget cycle was going to be significantly less than the one that we were going to be exiting. And a lot of hand wringing, a lot of lawmakers tried to blame her. She just told the numbers, she didn't make them up. So it was a tough time. Um, but after they pushed her a little bit, she said, you know what? I'm going to push right back. Fortner, I want you to write a speech that beats them up on the budget and lets them know that just how serious I am about all of this. Okay. Well, it's rare working for a politician where you get to write speeches that are completely from the gut, unvarnished, unflinching, look you dead in the eye and say, I don't agree with you and here's why. You know, the speech had a lot of red meat in it, but the thing that got more, I mean, it ended up being the headline in every newspaper in the country or every newspaper in the state the next day. And I think it was in the Washington Post and the New York Times too. And it was the one line that they quoted, and I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit. It's been 20 something years since I wrote this, but it was a quote from her where she said, "The last legislature threw a party and left this one with the hangover." They hated her for that speech too. Oh my gosh. Uh, she had a target on her back for the rest of her tenure as comptroller, and some of it was deserved because she didn't go along to get along. She was a force of nature. She was bigger than life. She had a thing she called her Yellow Pages test. Uh, she would talk about that in what she would refer to as her e-Texas initiatives. Now you might remember early part of this century, the early 2000s, as I heard someone say the other day, and the age spots jumped out on my hand at that point. Everything had an E on the front of it. E for electronic, E for this, E for that, E for energy. Um, she referred to what she called her Yellow Pages test, and her idea was, government shouldn't be doing it if it's available in the Yellow Pages for the same price or better. Um, Honestly, I think that was Doge before it was Doge. Call me crazy. Um, so she got a lot of heat from lawmakers about that because she pointed out a lot of the sacred cows. She had a thing. There was a thing in the comptroller's office called the school performance reviews. A whole division devoted to it. Well, they ended up stripping it from her because they didn't like her. You know, again, she said what she thought. And it is interesting to note that one of the ones that she got a lot of negative press about, AISD, the Austin Independent School District, ended up doing. I want to say this was 2002, 2003 at the latest. She said Austin ISD needs to sell that high dollar Caruth building over on 6th Street and move their headquarters into one of these abandoned schools that they're just letting sit there. Now, AISD did end up selling Caruth, but instead of doing it in a massive cost cutting or expense saving measure, they ended up in a even bigger building that I'm sure she hated with every fiber of her being. Carol Keaton Rylander, then Strayhorn, um, called herself one tough grandma, and she was. She didn't suffer fools. She had a famous temper, but I always used to tell people her temper was more like flash paper. It was very bright, very intense, but it was usually over quickly. And in her case, that was definitely true. Um, she used to have me put in every speech, and I said this on Monday. She used to have me put in every speech that as Texans, we stand on the shoulders of giants. She always had me quote Sam Houston, something that he wrote on the eve of the Battle of San Jacinto. Uh, we are nerved. We stand on the crud. I can't remember the exact quote. Basically, he's saying we are nerved for the conquest. In other words, we are ready for the fight, and that was Carol. And yeah, when she ended, I begged and pleaded with her before I left her employ to not run for governor. I thought it was a bad idea. I said, "Ma'am, you could stay comptroller another 2, 3, 4 terms if you wanted to, but with all due respect, ma'am, I don't think that you're going to win governor." and she disagreed with me, of course, but and ended up running and didn't win. But it doesn't change the fact that she was she was one tough grandma. My kids got used to the late night phone calls and sometimes the early morning phone calls. Thankfully, one of the earliest morning phone calls was when my family happened to be out of town. For some reason, I don't remember why. They were out of town, but I had to stay in town. She called me bright and early. This is when I was her acting communications director. Called me bright and early on a Saturday morning. It was about maybe 7 at the latest. Fortner, I want you to call Gary Susswine and beat him up and tell him we expect and want a correction in tomorrow's paper. And I want you to do it right now. And I said, no, ma'am, I'm not going to do that. She was like, what? And she was really angry. I said, ma'am, no one is at the paper. It's the weekend. Gary is at home with his wife and his family. I am not calling and waking him up on a Saturday morning because he won't be able to do anything about this until Monday at the earliest. She's like, fine, then you call him Monday and tell him that I want a correction because what he said was wrong. What he said wasn't really wrong. She just didn't like it. And I knew that given her ability to focus on one thing for a long, long time, that chances are she would have moved on to the next shiny penny, and she did. So by Monday, it was no longer on her mind, so I didn't call Susswine at all. Um, she was not always easy to work for, but man, she was fun to work for. I've said this before, as a political speechwriter, you don't always get to write anything fun. But with Carol, it was almost expected that you were going to write something that was a little outlandish. And I will always respect her for that. And I wish Texas had a few more characters with that same sort of fire and underneath it all good nature. She truly wanted what was best for the state. And yeah, she wanted what was best for her too, but she never forgot that she worked for Texans and they expected her to always have them in mind. So, like I said, a little bit of a departure for today's Red Mike message. Thank you for the indulgement. I will be back again tomorrow with a regular business or leadership kind of lesson. If you get a minute, look up Carol Keaton Rylander Strayhorn. Look up some of her old speeches. Let me know what you think. Again, rest in peace, Carol. I'll miss you, boss. Texas is a less fun place without you around. That's it for today. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. I'll see you again tomorrow. Life is short. Drink the bourbon.